Watch this until the end, and before you do anything else, please, if you know an elderly person living with relatives, call them today. Just call. That's all I'm asking. My name is Adeline. I'm 31, and last spring I buried my grandmother. The funeral was on a Thursday afternoon in a town called Millbrook, Vermont, where the maples were just starting to turn and the air smelled like wet bark and chimney smoke. 18 people showed up. Most of them were her former piano students, now grown, some bringing their own children. My aunt sat in the front pew wearing sunglasses indoors and checking her phone every 90 seconds. Her husband stood behind her with his hands in his pockets like he was waiting for a bus. I sat in the second row, alone, because I had asked to. Grandma Eleonora. I called her Grandma Elitet, piano in that town for 46 years. She moved to Millbrook in 1979 with my grandfather, a quiet engineer who died of a stroke when I was 11, and she stayed in their little blue Victorian on Chestnut Street even after the property taxes climbed and her hands started to shake. She lived alone until 3 years before her death, when my aunt convinced her she needed family support and moved in with her husband, supposedly to help. I want you to remember that word. Support. Because what they did wasn't support. It was a slow, deliberate erasure of a woman who, until her last breath, knew exactly who was robbing her. I drove up from Boston the morning of the funeral, 6 hours through October fog, and I went straight to the house. My aunt. I'll just call her my aunt, because saying her name still makes my jaw lock. Met me at the door with a tight little hug and that voice she uses, the one that drips honey while her eyes do something else entirely. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, "you look exhausted. Come in." We've already started sorting things. That was the first warning. The funeral was in 4 hours, and they were already sorting. The house smelled wrong. It smelled like bleach and old upholstery, and faintly like the lavender sachets Grandma L used to tuck into every drawer. But underneath all of it, there was a sourness I couldn't name. The smell of a place where someone had been sick for a long time and nobody had opened a window. The piano was still in the front parlor. The old Steinway upright she'd bought used in 1982, the one she'd taught me Fur Elise on when I was 7. The one she said had the most honest tone of any instrument I've ever played. But the lid was down and there were cardboard boxes stacked on top of it. "What are these?" I asked. "Just junk," my aunt said. "Sheet music. Old recordings. We're donating most of it." I lifted the top box. It was full of cassette tapes, hundreds of them, each one labeled in Grandma L's careful schoolteacher cursive. Recital recordings going back to the 80s. I picked one up. It said Bradford Spring, 1994. List. My uncle came in from the kitchen drying his hands on a dish towel and he watched me the way you watch a stray dog you're not sure about. "Adeline," he said, "why don't you go freshen up before the service? You've had a long drive." I put the tape back. I went upstairs to the guest room, never my room, because I'd never been allowed to stay overnight after they moved in, not even when Grandma L asked. I sat on the edge of the bed and I cried for about 3 minutes, very quietly, and then I washed my face and went downstairs to bury my grandmother. The service was small. The pastor said nice things about her hands, her patience, her gift for hearing the right note inside a wrong one. One of her oldest students, a man in his 50s now, played a Chopin nocturne on the church's spinet and broke down in the middle of it. My aunt sighed loudly and rearranged her scarf. We went back to the house afterward for what she called a small reception. It was crackers and cheese on paper plates. 6 people came. My aunt held court in the living room, dabbing at her eyes whenever someone looked at her. And her husband stood in the corner pouring himself bourbon from a bottle I knew Grandma L had kept for over a decade because my grandfather had bought it before he died. I went into the parlor and I lifted the lid of the piano. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe just to touch something of hers that hadn't been packed up yet. The keys were yellowed and one of the C's had always stuck a little. I pressed it. The note came out flat and wounded. I sat down on the bench, and I put my hand inside the keyhole compartment under the music desk, the little hollow space where Grandma L used to hide butterscotch candies for me when I was small. There was a folded piece of paper in there. Behind it, taped to the back wall of the compartment, was a small brass key. The paper was new. The ink was fresh. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, but shakier than I remembered, the loops uneven, like she'd written it fast or in pain. It said, Adeline, only you. Do not say a word in this house. Take the key. Go to Granite State Savings on Elm Street, Brattleboro. Ask for the safe deposit manager. Box 318. The combination is your birthday backwards. Listen to everything before you decide anything. I love you. I am sorry I waited so long. Grandma. I read it 3 times. My hands were shaking by the third, and then I did the smartest thing I have ever done in my life, the only thing I want every viewer watching this to understand if they take nothing else from my story. I did not tell anyone. I folded the note. I put it in my bra. I took the key and slid it into the small zipper pocket of my black funeral dress. I closed the piano lid. I went back into the kitchen, and I ate a cracker with cheese on it, and I asked my aunt if there was anything she needed help with. She said, "No, sweetheart, you've done enough just being here." I smiled at her. I think it was the first time in my life I'd ever truly hated someone. I stayed for another hour. I helped wash plates. I let my uncle hug me when I left. A long, strange hug, the kind where you can feel the other person checking you for something. When he pulled back, his eyes flicked over my dress, my purse, my hands. He was looking to see if I'd taken anything. I drove 43 miles to Brattleboro the next morning. I told my aunt I needed to get back to Boston for work, and she'd kissed my cheek and said we'd talk soon about the estate stuff. I drove south instead of east. The sun was coming through the trees in long yellow stripes, and I had not slept. Granite State Savings was a small branch on a corner across from a diner. I walked in at 9:14 a.m. and asked the teller, a young woman with a name tag that said Marlena, if I could speak to the safe deposit box manager. She asked if I had an appointment. I said no, but I have a key, and I have ID, and I think this is going to be complicated. She must have heard something in my voice. She picked up a phone, and a few minutes later, an older man in a navy cardigan came out of a back office and introduced himself as Mr. Quincy. He was maybe 60, with reading glasses on a chain and the kind of unhurried face that you instinctively trust. I gave him the box number. I gave him my driver's license. I gave him the combination, my birthday backwards. He looked at his screen for a long time. He looked at me. He looked at the screen again, and then he said, very carefully, "Miss, is the holder of this box your grandmother? Is she still living?" "She passed away on Sunday," I said. He closed his eyes for just a second, like he was steadying himself, and then he stood up and said, "Please come with me." He took me to the vault and pulled the long, flat box out of the wall. He carried it himself to a private viewing room with a wooden table and a single lamp. He said, "I'm going to step outside. Please take as much time as you need. When you're done, please do not leave. Come find me first." I asked him why. He hesitated, and then he said in a low voice, "Because your grandmother sat in this room with me 4 months ago, and she made me promise that when this box was opened by anyone, I would not let them leave the building without speaking to me. She was extremely clear, miss. She told me to call the state police if necessary." He shut the door. I sat down. I opened the lid. What was inside box 318 changed everything I thought I knew about the last 3 years of Grandma L's life. There were 7 small audio recorders, the kind you can buy at a drugstore, each one labeled with a month and year. There was a leather notebook, the cover worn soft with a rubber band around it. There was a manila envelope thick with paper. There was a smaller envelope marked Adeline, open this last. And there was a stack of photographs, maybe 40 of them, held together with a binder clip. I started with the notebook because I needed to hear her voice in writing before I heard it any other way. The first entry was dated almost 3 years earlier, 2 weeks after my aunt and uncle had moved into the house. The handwriting was still strong then. It read, "She rearranged my pill organizer today and told me I'd done it wrong. I had not done it wrong. I have been doing it the same way since 1998. I'm writing this down because if I don't write things down, I will start to believe her. I read the next entry, and the next. Page after page, in handwriting that grew shakier as the months passed, Grandma L documented everything. The Tuesday her checkbook went missing for 3 days and came back with 2 pages torn out. The Sunday my uncle changed the lock on her bedroom door for her safety so she couldn't leave it locked from the inside anymore. The afternoon she overheard my aunt on the phone telling someone her mother was declining rapidly and probably wouldn't make it through the winter, 6 months before she had any health issue at all. The night she found a new prescription bottle on her nightstand that she had not asked for and did not recognize. She had written down the names of the medications. She had written down the dosages. She had crushed one of the pills and saved it in a small plastic film canister, taped to a page of the notebook with masking tape, with a note, "Sample. Take to a doctor, not in Millbrook." I closed the notebook and I had to put my hand over my mouth. I picked up the recorder labeled March. I plugged in my earbuds. I pressed play. It was my aunt's voice. She was talking on the phone, somewhere in the kitchen, and the recorder must have been hidden in the next room. She was saying, "No, the realtor said we can't actually list it until she's gone, but he says the comps in the area are running close to 480, 490, and that's just the house, the land alone. Yeah, I know. Look, the doctor in Bennington is signing off on a cognitive eval next month. Once we have that, we can talk to the bank about getting power of attorney. Yes. No, she won't. She doesn't even know what day it is half the time. Honestly, Mark, sometimes I think she'd be better off in a home." Yes. Okay. Love you. Bye. The recording ended. I sat in that room for a long time before I played another one. There were 6 more. They got worse. There was a recording of my uncle going through Grandma L's jewelry box. I could hear the little wooden drawers opening and closing, and muttering to himself about which pieces were worth taking now and which ones to wait on. There was a recording of my aunt yelling at Grandma L for wandering in the backyard, except Grandma L sounded completely lucid, asking calmly why her phone wasn't working anymore and why her old friend Helen hadn't returned her calls. There was a recording, and this one I had to stop twice, of my aunt telling Grandma L, in the gentlest voice imaginable, that I had said I was too busy to visit her again this year. Which was a lie. I had been calling the house every week and being told Grandma L was napping or didn't feel like talking. For 3 years. For 3 years, they had been keeping my own grandmother from me, and they had been telling her I didn't want her anymore. I opened the manila envelope. Inside were bank statements. Dozens of them. Grandma L had been quietly requesting paper copies through a friend at the post office. I figured out later and storing them here. The statements showed transfers. Hundreds of them. Small ones at first, $600 here, $800 there, marked as household expenses or caregiver services. Then larger ones, $3,000 in a single transfer in June of the first year, $12,000 the next January, $41,000 the following spring, marked as home repairs, to a contracting company that, according to a printed page from a state business registry tucked into the envelope, was registered to my uncle's brother. In total, by Grandma L's own careful tally on the last page of the ledger, they had drained $486,000 from her accounts over 31 months. They had also, I learned from a separate set of documents, taken out a reverse mortgage on her house without her knowing, by getting her to sign what they told her was a Medicare form, and pulled another $210,000 in equity. That was almost $700,000. From a retired piano teacher with arthritis and a sticky middle C. I opened the photographs. Some of them were of bruises on her upper arms. Some of them were of empty pill bottles lined up on her bathroom counter. Some of them were of receipts. Some of them were of my aunt's car parked outside a jewelry buyer in Manchester, time-stamped, with my uncle visible carrying a velvet pouch. Grandma L had taken these from her bedroom window with a little disposable film camera. The same kind of camera she used to bring to my piano recitals when I was a kid. I opened the last envelope. There was a letter inside. It was shorter than I expected. "My Adeline, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you found the key. I am so sorry. I knew what they were doing almost from the beginning. I tried to tell people. I called my lawyer, but he's old and forgetful now, and I think she got to him too. I called your mother, but you know how your mother is. I could not call you because they took my phone in the second month and only let me use theirs, and they listened to every word. I want you to know two things. First, I never stopped loving you, and I never said any of the things they told you I said. Second, I waited so long because I needed proof. The kind of proof a court cannot wave away. I have left all of it here for you. Take it to the police. Take it to a lawyer. Do not let them tell you I was confused. I was never confused, my darling. I was just outnumbered. Play something beautiful for me. I love you forever. Grandma L. I sat in that little room with the lamp on, and I cried the way a person cries when there is no one to perform for. Wet, ugly, silent crying. I did not try to stop. When I came out, Mr. Quincy was sitting at his desk pretending to read something. He stood up immediately when he saw my face. Miss, he said, would you like me to call the police now, or would you like to call your own attorney first? I asked him if I could use his phone. I called a lawyer my college roommate's father had used in a different matter years ago, an estate litigation attorney in Burlington named Mrs. Hadley. I told her, in a voice that did not sound like mine, what was in the box. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Adeline, listen to me very carefully. Do not go back to that house. Do not warn them. Do not let them know what you have. Get a hotel tonight. I'll have a courier come for certified copies of everything in the box in the morning. We are going to do this exactly right. I stayed in a hotel by the highway. I did not sleep. I watched the ceiling and I tried to remember the sound of Grandma L laughing, and I could not, and that was almost worse than anything else. The investigation took 11 months. I will not lie to you and pretend it was clean or easy. The first time my aunt was questioned by the state's elder abuse unit, she cried so beautifully that one of the investigators told Mrs. Hadley off the record that he wasn't sure they had a case. Then they listened to the recordings. All of them. There were 43 hours total. Grandma L had been recording for almost 2 years before her death, switching out recorders, hiding them in the planter on the kitchen windowsill, in the bathroom, under the piano bench. There were conversations on those tapes that I will not repeat in this story, things my aunt said about her own mother that I cannot say out loud without my throat closing. The contractor turned out to be the easy charge. My uncle's brother flipped immediately and gave the prosecutors everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. The reverse mortgage paperwork had a forged signature that didn't match any of Grandma L's signatures from before the year they moved in. 3 different handwriting experts agreed. The jewelry buyer in Manchester still had records of the pieces my uncle had brought in, including a sapphire brooch that had belonged to my great-grandmother and was photographed in a 1953 wedding announcement that I dug out of an attic box. The cognitive evaluation my aunt had been arranging, the doctor she had been bribing, a man in his late 70s running a small practice out of his home, was indicted separately. 3 other families came forward once his name was in the local paper. Grandma L was not the only one. The autopsy, which the police ordered exhumation for, found levels of a sedative in my grandmother's system that had no medical justification. The cause of death was officially changed from natural causes to undetermined, pending criminal proceedings. They could not prove she had been killed, but they could prove beyond any reasonable doubt that she had been drugged into compliance for the better part of 2 years. The trial was in late summer the following year. My aunt got 11 years for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery, and conspiracy. My uncle got 7 for the same charges, plus theft of personal property over a certain threshold. The court ordered full restitution. Their house was sold, their cars were sold. Their retirement accounts were emptied to pay back the estate. A separate civil judgment took the rest. I sat in that courtroom every single day. I wore a small silver pendant that Grandma L had given me for my high school graduation, a music note on a thin chain. On the day the verdicts were read, my aunt looked at me from across the room and mouthed the word, "Please." I looked back at her and I did not move my face. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel anything I could put a name to. I just kept thinking about Grandma L sitting at her kitchen table writing in that notebook with her arthritic hands, alone in a house full of people who hated her for being alive. I want to tell you the rest, because the rest is the part I think matters. I did not sell the house on Chestnut Street. I quit my job in Boston 6 months after the trial. I moved into the little blue Victorian with the sticky middle C and the lavender sachets that I have now refilled. I had the locks changed. I had the floors refinished. I opened every window in that house for a week straight in the spring, and I let the wind move through it until it smelled like a home again. I teach piano now. I am not as good a teacher as Grandma L was. I will never be, but I am learning. I have 19 students. 3 of them I teach for free because their families cannot afford lessons, and Grandma L would have done the same. I keep one of her recital recordings playing softly in the parlor on the afternoons I teach, very low, just so the room remembers her. I started a small nonprofit out of the second bedroom. It is called the Honest Note Project. We help families in rural Vermont identify signs of financial and medical abuse in elderly relatives. We pay for independent cognitive evaluations when adult children are pressuring an elder into one. We pay for cameras and recorders for elders who suspect they are being mistreated and have no one to believe them. We have helped, in our first 10 months of operation, 14 families. 2 of those cases ended in criminal charges. One ended in a grandfather being moved out of his daughter's home and back into his own, with a court-appointed guardian who is not related to him. I do not visit my aunt in prison. She has written me 4 letters. I have not opened any of them. They are in a shoebox in the basement, and one day I might burn them or I might not. I haven't decided. My uncle died of a heart attack in his 2nd year of incarceration. I found out from a paralegal at Mrs. Hadley's office. I did not go to the funeral. I do not know if there was one. The piano is still in the parlor. I had it tuned. The middle C still sticks, just a little, and I've decided to leave it that way. It sounds like her. I am telling you this story for one reason and one reason only. There is a person in your life, right now, who is old and quiet and being managed by someone who calls themselves a caregiver. Maybe you are that caregiver, and maybe you are good, and most of you are. But some of you watching this know exactly who I am talking about in your own family. You have felt it, the phone calls that stop, the visits that get harder to schedule, the strange thinness in your grandmother's voice the one time she does pick up, the way her stories don't add up anymore, not because she is confused, but because someone is editing them for her. Call her. Today. Drive there if you have to. Walk in without warning. Bring a friend if you are afraid. Look in her medicine cabinet. Listen to what she says when no one else is in the room. The quietest people in our lives are watching everything. They know exactly what is happening to them. They are just waiting for someone to believe them. I waited too long. I let 3 years go by while my own grandmother was being eaten alive in a house I had been told I was not welcome in. I will carry that for the rest of my life, but I will also carry the sound of that middle C, slightly flat, in a parlor that smells like lavender again, on a street in a town in Vermont where, every Wednesday afternoon, a 7-year-old girl named Junie comes over and learns to play Fur Elise on the same piano I learned it on. Grandma L asked me in her last letter to play something beautiful for her. I am trying. Every day. I am trying. If the story moved you, please share it with one person, just one, who needs to make a phone call this week. That is the only thing I will ask of you. Thank you for staying with me to the end. I have thought a lot, in the quiet evenings since the trial ended, about why my grandmother had to spend 3 years of her life writing in a notebook with arthritic hands instead of simply picking up the phone. And every time I come back to the same uncomfortable truth, cruelty does not begin with cruelty. It begins with small permissions. My aunt did not wake up one morning and decide to drug an old woman. She started by rearranging a pill organizer and being told she was helpful. She started by intercepting a phone call and being told she was protective. Every unchecked liberty became the floor for the next one. By the time she was forging signatures on reverse mortgage paperwork, she had already convinced herself she was the family hero. That is how it always works. Evil does not announce itself, it accumulates. What saved my grandmother in the end was not luck, it was character. Eleanora was a piano teacher for 46 years, and a piano teacher knows something most people forget, that you cannot fake your way through a difficult passage. You either practiced or you didn't. She practiced patience. She practiced documentation. She practiced the long, lonely discipline of writing the truth down on a Tuesday when nobody was watching and no one would believe her if they did. That is what intelligence really is, in my opinion. Not cleverness, not winning arguments. Intelligence is the willingness to gather evidence quietly while everyone around you insists you are imagining things. And courage, I have learned, is rarely loud. My grandmother never raised her voice. She never confronted my aunt. She just kept writing, kept recording, kept tucking small disposable cameras into her windowsill, kept hiding film canisters of crushed pills between the pages of a leather notebook. She built her case the way a good teacher builds a student, slowly, lesson by lesson, refusing to skip steps. The strength it took to live in that house, day after day, knowing what was happening and choosing to outlast it for my sake. I do not think I have that kind of strength yet, but I am trying to grow into it. The lesson I carry forward is simple, and it is the one I want to leave you with. Be the kind of person whose quietness is a discipline, not a surrender. Be the kind of person who writes things down when no one believes you. Be the kind of person who calls the grandmother in your life today, even if it is awkward, even if someone else picks up first. Goodness is not a feeling. It is a habit you practice, the same way you practice scales. Badly at first, then a little better, then someday almost without thinking. Eleanora played one true note her whole life. I am still learning to hear it. But every Wednesday afternoon, when a small girl named Junie sits beside me at that old upright and presses the slightly flat middle C, I hear my grandmother again. And I believe she is teaching me still.